came to talk primarily about the issue of an endorsement, and number one, should you endorse someone who's running against an established incumbent, and number two, if you should go against an incumbent, is Congressman Wolf the type of incumbent that needs to be replaced, essentially. And start with a little bit of background. I worked in the federal government for about 15 years, mostly financial sector agencies. My background is finance and economics, and I went to law school in the 90s at GW at night, and transitioned from being a financial person to a legal person, and did that for, like I said, about 15 years, and then the last 8 years I've been a contractor working for various governments in emerging markets in those same topical areas, financial sector development to be specific. And then also in the 90s I did quite a bit of policy work for Cato Institute, and also did a piece or two for American Enterprise Institute. And do some charity work. Fund for American Studies is an educational organization that has programs in the U.S., throughout Europe, throughout Asia. They're starting in South America. Essentially gives undergraduate students primarily, and also graduate students secondarily, opportunities to get internships, kind of their first job, first real job where they have to show up every day, and also intellectual stimulation in that they also combine that usually with a class or two. In the D.C. area, the institute is at Georgetown. They usually go to class in the morning, and then in the afternoon they intern anywhere on Capitol Hill or somewhere in the D.C. area. Transition to Congressman Wolf, just because that is a big part of what we had previously talked about. It's an important part of the endorsement. How I decided to get in the race is kind of an interesting story. As I said, I travel a lot, and a couple weeks before the 2006 race, maybe about 6 weeks, I decided to just read up on the race, go to debates and such. And I took one of these Vote Smart surveys, and I really didn't know too much about Congressman Wolf. I had moved between the 10th and 11th district. I moved there in the 80s and was there for a little while, and then moved into 11th, and then when I moved to Loudon, I went back out to the 10th district. But I took one of the Vote Smart surveys, and it showed I agreed with him about 25 or 30% of the time, which really shocked me. And then as I started to look at the underlying votes, and I'm embarrassed by the fact that I didn't know that much about his voting record until I just decided to sit down and go through it in that detail. All the underlying votes were big government. I mean, I gave you a list here. Whether it be his, he refuses to sign off on the Americans for Tax Reform, no tax increase pledge. And a lot of that, I think, is linked to his Entitlements Commission proposal, which I see as just a huge tax increase waiting to happen. If you look at the press releases that were put out at the time of the release of this session, it essentially says, it quotes Representative Cooper, who's his colleague that co-sponsors it, but it says, hey, we need to make the cuts in the programs and also increase the taxes to tackle this entitlement program. So to me, it's just a huge tax increase that he's pushing with that, and that's one of his pet projects. And you think about all the last 6 or 8 years, all the big government programs that were passed under the Republican Congress, and all that the Democrats have passed in the year plus they've been there, whether it be prescription drug program, which was done under Republicans, increasing the minimum wage, done under the Dems. Congressman Wolf voted for about half of the appropriations bills in 2007. And on and on and on. He voted against the repeal of the D.C. gun ban. He voted for No Child Left left behind, which moves a lot of the responsibilities from education to the state, from the state to the federal government. And finally, Journey Through Hallowed Ground, which is one of his favorite little pet projects, which is essentially federal zoning law, where this vague entity that's created under federal law has all these authorities, which potentially could be a bunch of environmental, I don't know if whack job is too harsh a term, but people that could be dictating property rights in the years to come. Right, whack job?
That's the word. I didn't know about this. I think that's a charitable term for them.
But, and I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, well, you know, I don't really think Frank Wolf has changed too much over the years. He's always been a good fiscal conservative. But this is the National Taxpayer rating, or National Taxpayer Union rating. This is one of the best, as far as I'm concerned, ratings out there. It doesn't take 10 bills, it doesn't take 20 bills, it doesn't take 50 bills, it doesn't take 100 bills. It takes 200 bills during a single year and puts together an index. And as you can see there, 1995 was the first year that's on there, and that was the height of the Republican Revolution, and he got 80 out of 100 from the National Taxpayer Union. And it just goes down from there. It's down to 45 now, and my guess is based on his 2007 votes, which were, again, the minimum wage was one of them, all the appropriations bills he voted for, the bloated ones that the Democrats put out, and S-chip, he voted for the reauthorization and dramatic increase in that. I wouldn't be surprised if it pushed lower and even maybe into the 30s. The last page, which will be interesting as a side-by-side comparison, I'm on the Yahoo group, and I see that I would say that Congressman Flake and Dr. Paul are probably the two, I guess you would call them benchmark representatives that everybody talks about. And not to say everybody chooses one or the other as their favorite, but those seem to be the most popular. And if you look at I've got a list here, either the National Taxpayer Union scores, Club for Growth is one of the other ones I use quite a bit. They're a Reaganite limited government organization. They mostly focus on economic issues.
Yeah.
And then Cato Institute has a free trade index. And then Club for Growth also has this report card which shows how much they support pork votes. And I've got, on the right side of this, I probably should have put this on the left side, but I accidentally put it on the right, is Congressman Gilchrist and Congressman Wolf.